Welcome to the Urbanist Agenda. This is Jason from Not Just Bikes, and I'm joined today by Chris and Melissa Bruntlett, who just wrote a new book. Hi, Chris. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Jason. How's it going?
It's going great. Thanks so much for coming on. I don't think you've been on the podcast before, right? But we have met in person a few times, and you've written other books before, too. But anyway, welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, I think unless Chris has been on before, but I don't think I have.
I don't think so.
No, this is definitely a first appearance for the Bruntletts. Yeah.
That seems kind of surprising, given, how long you and I have both been doing this. But anyway, why don't you quickly introduce yourself, Melissa? Maybe we'll start with you in case anybody doesn't know who the Bruntletts are.
Sure. Well, I'm Melissa, half of the Melissa and Chris Bruntlett. I have been working as an advocate and advisor for cycling now for nearly 15 years, starting in Vancouver, Canada, and then moving over here together with Chris, obviously, in 2019. My work focuses a lot on the advising side from a communications and engagement aspect for public, private entities, NGOs, helping them to see the value of developing good narratives, but also making sure that we have all the voices at the table. So I work a lot on gender equity, inclusion, thinking about various ages and abilities and how they move, and do that as a consultant with my own company called Modacity Creative, which started a year and a half ago. And prior to that, have been working, in consultancies or together with Chris on Modacity and writing books together in the meantime.
Very good. Chris?
Yeah, and I am obviously the other half of this dynamic duo, which I think we often emphasize was never really part of the plan. It kind of happened by accident. We both come from very separate career paths and fields. And, about 16 years ago, sold our family car and settled on this urbanist communicator journey that has resulted in 3 books. And for the past 7 years, myself working for a nonprofit organization called the Dutch Cycling Embassy. And so lucky enough now to live and work here in Delft. And much like you, relocated from Canada, from suburbia in a lot of ways, and very much feel lucky to not just live here now, but try to communicate some of the benefits and work with cities on implementing those changes on their own streets.
Yeah, I've been following Modacity for a very long time. I think maybe even before I moved to the Netherlands. It's been a long, long time. And because, I was also on urbanist Twitter before it got taken over by Nazis. And that's where Not Just Bike started as well. So I remember following your Twitter account and seeing you move to the Netherlands, and it was all very exciting. And it's interesting, obviously you took a very similar path to our family, right? Similar kind of thing, living in Canada and then moving to the Netherlands and wanting to tell people about how great it is.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of what we at least try to do, is show what this life is like. Of course, it's through the social media lens. So for a lot of people, it might look like
obviously
it's all, ivory towers and beautiful rainbows. But yeah, I think for us, it's always about trying to help inspire people to see what can be possible. And always, at least for me, this idea that, now we have young nieces and a nephew, and we'd really like that suburban Ontario could, be for them what it got to be for our kids when we moved here.
Wouldn't that be nice? I remember when you moved and there were lots of posts that you were putting on social media about your kids being able to actually cycle around by themselves safely, which was like a novel concept. That was not possible, even though they were, teenagers by the time you moved, right? Or close to it.
Yeah, that first trip we took as a family, the summer of 2016, they were 8 and 10. And that was we often refer to their first taste of freedom. We lived in 5 different Dutch cities, but I think some of their best memories they brought back with them were walking around Amsterdam, being able to go to Vondel Park without mom or dad chaperoning them everywhere. And for them, that was world changing. And really, there were quite literally tears shed when it was time to leave. And, I think that very much motivated us to look for jobs and opportunities to come back to the Netherlands, to allow them to live at least their teenage years in that type of built environment that supports their autonomy and freedom.
Yeah. And we had exactly the same experience with our kids. And that, of course, brings us to your books. Your first 2 books were kind of Dutch related, right? The first one was very, very Dutch related. But we're not here to talk about those 2. We can maybe refer to them later. We're here to talk about your most recent book, your 3rd book, which is called Women Changing Cities, Global Stories of Urban Transformation. And, Chris dropped by my studio few weeks ago and gave me this book. And yeah, it's fantastic. As usual, I enjoyed your first two books, obviously, because it told a very similar story to what we had. But this one was quite different. This one, actually, I really liked it because, to be totally honest, I get a little tired of reading urbanist books these days because I feel like I've read a lot of urbanist books and it's the same thing over and over again. And like, how many times do I need to hear about mixed use zoning? But this is different. So tell me a little bit about the inspiration for this. Maybe Melissa, you could start.
Yeah. I mean, when we present on the book, I mean, of course, we want to answer the question, why write a book entirely about women? And, I can have a very quick answer. There's so many books about men. That's why we wrote a book about women. But it was more, I think, a culmination of some things that Chris and I were watching online on, you know, the former urbanist hub that was Twitter, and of course all the other platforms, of these amazing changes that were happening around the world, particularly around COVID, and starting to see some similar themes in terms of leadership in those cities. And at the same time, both of our jobs kind of were shifting from this very sort of North American, Western Europe focus to looking more further abroad. So looking to Latin America, to Africa, to Asia, and seeing changes happening there, and really wanting to tell these stories of transformation that were happening, to let people know, that it's not just a Dutch idea, because yes, the first two books are very Dutch focused. We really wanted to step away from that and say it's not just about the Netherlands, but also talk about this recurring theme of women in roles of leadership and, why they were seeming to get shit done, essentially. And that became sort of the hypothesis of the book: is, can women achieve things in a different way and find greater success in some ways than their male counterparts? And why is that happening? Why are, spoiler alert, Anne Hidalgo or Valerie Plante from Montreal or Ada Colau in Barcelona having such huge success? And yeah, learning a bit about what that looks like and hopefully take away some lessons that we can use for future cities.
I think that's exactly what I liked so much about this, because it was a lot more of the really good examples of changes, like real changes that happened in cities to make them better, rather than talking about the theoreticals about cities, or again, yeah, like going over and over and over again that the Netherlands is some of the best cities in the world. Some of these cities, some of them are better than others, but all of them are improving. And I think that's the important part there. And then you focused on some of the specific things that these cities have done and these women leaders have done to improve your cities. And I really did like how broad it was across the world, which is remarkable. I mean, the other thing that I want, because people can't see this on the podcast, this book is, not like a novel. It's color photographs throughout that are absolutely beautiful. So did you guys take these photos yourself on location?
Very much so, yeah. And this was always the intention from the start. We were hesitant to commit to putting ourselves through the rigmarole of writing a book again. The first two took a lot out of us, and we kind of thought we'd said all we need to say. And we did kind of look at each other and say, if we want to do this a third time and put ourselves through this, it had to be a fun process. So the process was part of what sold us on committing to do it again. And it was, of course, being able to visit. Well, we were ultimately only able to visit 9 out of the 11 cities that are showcased around the world.
Only.
Yeah. And part of that was dedicated trips. Part of that was in combination of travel that we had planned through our day jobs. In the other 2 cities, we just couldn't make it work. So we hired local photographers to do so. But, this is just, I think, a very natural extension of what we're already doing on our various social media channels, is telling visual stories. But in this case, being able to do a bit of a deeper dive and getting into, why it's happening, who are the people that are making it happening, what is transferable to other places in the world. And as Melissa said, this started out with a hypothesis. And for the first time in the writing process, we didn't know where we were going to end up. We didn't know what answers we were going to come up with until we got to the very end. And then we were able to kind of draw some conclusions. But it was very much a result of 2 years of investigation and global travels and photography and storytelling and interviews. And the resulting book, we are obviously very proud of.
Yeah, I am incredibly impressed at just how beautiful the book is, to be honest. I'll put links in the show notes, by the way, to anybody who's interested in learning more or purchasing the book, of course. And it's incredible because, I've done a lot of travel in my life, a lot for business travel. And I've been to many, many cities, but there were a bunch here that I had never been to, like Kampala. And I've never been to Delhi, for example, or Bogota. So I think it was just fantastic to see like that so clearly. Yeah, anyway, I really, really enjoyed that. And it does feel like a logical extension of what you've been doing on social media for a long time, because I know that your jobs take you to various places. And when you're there, I always enjoy seeing the social media dump on your Instagram of, all the places you've been and the little clips of you guys cycling in these really nice looking places. I love it. So I like that you were able to turn that into a book here. Fantastic.
Yeah, like Chris said, that was the draw. So we had actually had a conversation that we were not going to write a third book, and we were on many podcasts saying people, no, that's it. We're done. We've said all we need to say. We're good. And it was an email from Reba Publishing in the UK. I was just saying, if you guys are ever interested, we'd love to put together a photo book. And I knew as soon as, like, Chris was at home when I received it. And as soon as that email came, I'm like, we're writing a third book.
Yeah, photo book, it's got to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And it is this opportunity to, I say, monetize this work that we've been doing on social media. It's not, if anyone who is looking to write a book to make money, please don't do that. That's not what happens.
Yeah.
But to be able to sort of create this time capsule of those travels, of all those photos that we take in a way that, we at least physically have a copy and others can, have these, time capsules of what was happening in various cities over the last, few years as a memory of what was achieved and, what can be achieved.
Of all these, which one do you think was like the most surprising to you? Because I know which ones were most surprising to me, but
Yeah.
Do you want to go first with that, Chris?
Yeah. I mean, for me, Tirana is one that certainly jumps out because I think
yeah,
we had done a lot of research and really even all of that didn't prepare us for the reality of dropping on the ground in the center of Tirana, which is this kind of heaving, unplanned, chaotic city that popped up almost overnight after the collapse of communism with no central planning, no permits, no nothing. And so they have hundreds of thousands of cars and hundreds of thousands of buildings that were never organized from the start. And out of that chaos and out of what is a fairly, emerging economy, they've been able to do just some incredible things around school streets, around creating new playgrounds for children, carving out the bare bones of a cycling infrastructure network. These are all things that, we hear they cost money, but they really are proving that all it costs is political will. And in this case, through the vision of their leadership, they've been able to do some incredible things by pivoting that city and getting those people to look at the child-friendly city lens in particular. That has been kind of the angle and the approach that they have taken, and it's very successful. We're headed back there in about a month, and I'm very much looking forward to revisiting it a second
nice.
time with fresher eyes, because I think it was one of those cities that really jumped out. Don't get me wrong, they've got a lot of work to do, and it's still heavily polluted and congested and a stressful place to be, but they planted a lot of seeds, including teaching children how to cycle on traffic gardens and so on. So they're investing in the next generation, and very excited to see how that city develops in the years and decades ahead.
Yeah.
That was one that was surprising to me as well, for sure. I've never been there before. I never even thought of that city before, to be honest. So to see some of these pictures, and just to follow on of what you said there, one of the most frustrating things to me about any of this urbanism advocacy that I've done anywhere ever has been that cost issue that everyone talks about how much it costs. And I've now got to the point where I'm just like, if you think this stuff is expensive, then you just haven't looked at the automobile infrastructure budget ever, because this stuff's stupidly cheap, like stupidly cheap. And the fact that you can have a city like Manila, which I have been to, but admittedly not for about 25 years, my God. But if you can have a city like Manila making changes, then come on, you can do this literally anywhere. And wealthy developed nations have no excuse. It really does come down to political will.
Yeah. In terms of places that surprised me, I don't know. I get asked this question, or we both get asked this question, or it's like, is there one woman that stands out? And it's like having a favorite kid. You don't want to say, like, no, I don't have a favorite child. That's ridiculous. I don't have a favorite story. But I think they each have their merit. But one of the things I think I enjoy retelling when we present about what we got to see in the travels for the book is in Bogota, for example. It's known, it has a very storied history as being the birthplace of the cyclovia, of the BRT. People are familiar with some of the more urbanist successes that they've had. But when I got to travel there in 2023, I think the big moment for me was when we were in the more informal communities, the lower income areas, and you're seeing cycling there. You're seeing investment in cycling there, but you're
Right.
also actually seeing everyday people of varying incomes, of varying ages on bikes. And I still remember I like freaked out and I saw someone carrying a baby and I yelled and ruined someone's video by saying, "Oh my God, there's someone with a baby." Because this is something that's so commonplace for us living in the
Right.
Netherlands. You just see this and you're like, it's just another mom or dad with their baby on their chest, no big deal.
Right.
But to see that in a place where you think that people just don't do that, it was like, no, but it is happening. It's here right in front of us. And we need to stop saying, well, that's only in the Netherlands because it's happening in Bogota.
Right. And that is, I think, a really great indicator. As soon as you see people starting to ride with their children, then that's a good indicator that things are moving in the right direction. However, of course, I mean, and it frustrates me to no end when cities put all of their bike infrastructure in their wealthy areas. Because, I mean, look, the people who live in wealthy areas are the ones that have lots of free time and know how to contact politicians and have potential political connections to get stuff done.
Hmm.
But it really does need to be installed everywhere. And in many cases, it's those lower income places that benefit the most because, I mean, cycling is so cheap. It is so ridiculously cheap, which I hear all the time in the Netherlands where people tell me they don't want to take public transit because it costs money, whereas their bike is cheap. And
Yeah,
so even the wealthy people are riding 50 euro Omafeets that they bought used 20 years ago because
exactly.
they don't want to pay for the tram.
Well, and this is the thing, I think, with a lot of the stories that we got to profile in the book, too, is that these women who are making these changes are not just thinking about creating options for the people that already have the most choice. So it's not just about creating wonderful walkable neighborhoods in the more affluent areas
Yeah.
where they already have an expensive bicycle and a car and access to car share or, good public transport or all those things. It's everyone else, trying to get them up to a better level where it's getting to be more equitable. Of course, a lot of these cities have a long way to go still, but it's this idea of this is not a solution for, those of us who, yeah, have all the options already. It's creating the options for those that don't.
Yeah, and I think whenever I hear people talking about gentrification, a lot of gentrification comes from just the city investing money into a place to make it nice, and then people want to live there, which drives the price of things up. The solution to that is to make everywhere nice. Like, why don't we just improve all the city in slowly but surely in all different ways? And then there isn't sort of one area that's super nice and everything else is covered in cars. It's like we can make the whole city nice, which really can happen and doesn't have to be expensive. So, with respect to the book, why do you think it is that women are doing things differently?
Well, yeah, that was the $1 million question and the reason why we wanted to go through this whole process. And we literally sat down with every single one of the 19 women that are featured in the pages of the book and asked them the same set of questions because we really didn't know at the start of this process, what it is about the female experience that breaks through the status quo. And of course, it's oversimplistic to say that if you elect women, your city will, change for the better. Of
Yeah.
course, there are exceptions to this rule, but there seems to be something about the leadership qualities that they demonstrate that means that, for example, they're less worried about popular opinion. They're more in tune to what the community wants rather than what the loud voices say. They're more thinking about the care work that happens invisibly and non-economically in your community. And they're used to working with multi-stakeholders on complex projects and multitasking all of the time. And so yeah, by the end of the book, we try to summarize and simplify and boil it down to 5 leadership qualities that we thought we should, as urbanists and as human beings, be championing with our elected officials in our cities, with the emphasis that these are not inherently female traits. Plenty of men also demonstrate these leadership qualities, and plenty of men should learn and adapt these leadership qualities so that at the end of the day, it's not just a gender binary thing, but it is about we're getting the elected officials that we deserve, and they are demonstrating the courage to meet the moment that we're currently at. Because we make this point at the start of the book where our cities are facing unprecedented deluge of crisis after crisis. And the reaction of a lot of people, mostly men, because men disproportionately make up the decision makers in our cities, is to try to freeze our cities in amber and make sure that they do not change or have to adjust or adapt. That's only going to get us so far in this process before our cities really start collapsing under the weight of these immense challenges.
And I think one thing to add on that is while the women that we spoke to are coming at their jobs from a place of empathy, of valuing the role of care in cities, we talked about this in Curbing Traffic as well. The second book in the feminist chapter is that we all bring with us our inherent experiences to the jobs that we do. And so it's not that men can't do, good, livable, walkable, child-friendly cities. It's just that when we have better balance, we have more perspectives at the table. So if you have more women in roles of leadership, they're coming, many of them, as moms, as caregivers, as people that are used to having to navigate cities while looking after somebody else or while thinking about their own personal safety. And so that's going to influence how they approach their job. Similarly, people with disabilities, older adults, if we have them in their advocacy groups, are able to speak to what it's like to move around the city with, reduced mobility and reduced eyesight, all the very myriad things that impact us as we get old. And so that's kind of the crux of it, is if we don't have representatives leading us who look like our communities, that reflect the diversity in our communities, we're always leaving somebody out. And so that's part of, what each of these women are bringing is their own personal perspectives, helping to influence how they approach their role, either as a mayor, as a counselor, as an advocate, or so on.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, actually, because I wonder then even if it's like less so women and more so just more diversity in the decision-making process and more inputs from different ways. Because I've noticed that myself, even when I used to work in tech, when I would work at companies that were quite diverse and had people who came from all over the world and had all different backgrounds, maybe worked in different industries and things like that. When I had discussions in groups like that, that diversity always brought in diversity of opinion, but also diversity of experience, which like fundamentally changed the conversation every time. You get a bunch of typical tech dudes from the US or something, or Silicon Valley, and they do things very differently than if you then bring in people from all over and all sorts of different backgrounds and experience. And I think that's an incredibly important point, that it's also like, where are the people who have disabilities that come in and get involved in these projects as well?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think that is incredibly important.
Yeah.
And there seems to be, I think, this kind of misguided belief that we've solved that problem in urbanism.
Oh, yeah, there's no way.
There's sometimes when you post about this online and you get some pushback, and it's like, well, no, if you look at the numbers, people, certainly planning and engineering schools, the graduates of those programs are quite diverse, and particularly when it comes to a gender split. But that diversity is not permeating up into the levels of management, decision making, and leadership. And that's the leaky pipeline that we identify at the start of the book. Is there are various structural, cultural issues that are preventing that. And so we have a decision making class that is very pale, stale, and male. And they are bringing all of their implicit and explicit biases to those roles. And of course, the windshield worldview permeates that and means that everything in a lot of places is done to prioritize the car at the expense of every other mode of transportation.
Yeah, and I've noticed it's so obvious when you start looking for it that so much of urban planning in most cities is just organized around a guy getting to work as quickly as possible. And that's like the worldview. Like, as far as the city is concerned, there's the house, there's the work, and then the only time I care about the city is when I'm in my car and I need to get to my work as soon as possible so that I'm not late. And looking at the city through that lens is just so unbelievably, incredibly toxic. And we need less of that, much, much, much less of that.
I mean, yeah.
It's obvious to you and I.
That's why we're here.
Oh, that's the point. Like, it's obvious once you know about it, but when you don't know about it, it just seems like, well, yeah, that's like, of course, people got to get to work. Like, what are you going to do? And it just defines everything. Even I found, and one of the issues that I have sometimes when people are talking about anything that I say in my videos, I'll get people complaining about this or that or the other thing. And one of the things I've noticed is that there's a very stark difference between the people who don't have kids and the people who do have kids, and the way that you look at your neighborhood and city. I remember even the roads that I would cycle on before I had kids, and I would not cycle on them after I had kids. And also just the entire way you look at your neighborhood changes as soon as you have children.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably an important part of this too, because culturally, like no like real sex reason, but culturally women look after kids more often. They spend more time with kids.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably feeding into this.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's interesting because I hear this a lot. I mean, we've both heard this a lot over the years is, the way I move or the way I cycle is totally different now because, I realized what it was like to push a stroller, to have a kid in a back trailer and a buck seats and a cargo bike, those kinds of things. And that's important. Like those experiences are important to help shift how we can build greater understanding. But I think back to, yeah, Chris was recounting being at a conference and a gentleman saying, like, my worldview entirely shifted because I had children. And that's great, but it shouldn't take you having kids.
Agreed. Exactly. Right. Like you
to
shouldn't have to be
understand.
forced into it. It's one of these
Yeah.
things where it's like sometimes people only get it when it affects them and they're just oblivious to it otherwise. And I
Yeah.
guess that's a big question. How do we make people understand that without having to give them children or make them women?
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the takeaways is, and I mentioned it earlier, this idea of having empathy for other people's experiences. Because, I mean, you know, maybe take out the children, but replace it with having a disability. We
Sure.
have an entire urban planning, transport planning, architecture field that is not well represented by the disabled community, but yet we can take into account somewhat their needs. So it's just being empathetic to the fact that someone else exists differently from you and their access to the world is just as important as yours. And, we all have to learn. We all have to check ourselves. It's all about recognizing, you might think you have all the answers, but there's always something new to learn. It's just, getting people to check their own egos is always a bit of a challenge. But I mean, if we can shift that, then it doesn't matter if you have kids or don't have kids, or if you're a woman, or if you're a man, or gender non binary, or you have a disability. If we stop looking at it so selfishly and start being a bit more empathetic. But of course, that's a utopian future that maybe we're not living in at the moment.
Well, at the very least, we can get different people in positions of power to be able to be in those meetings. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Chris, you've mentioned before that this is not just a book for women, and that's kind of what we're talking about here. Do you want to expand on like what you mean by that?
Well, I think, yeah, and this has been the interesting thing about, because the book has now been out for 7 or 8 months, and I'd be lying if I said that the reaction has been as enthusiastic as the first two books. We've struggled a little bit to sell books, to get interest from organizations that want to host us for events, to get people talking about it and reviewing it online. And in part, the only explanation I have is that it has the word women in the title. And by making something about gender, a lot of men will see that and think that's not for me. This conversation is not, my business or my domain, or this doesn't affect me. And we have to really push back on that idea because, of course, at the end of the day, we're talking about cities that work better for everybody. And we're just approaching it through the angle of female leadership. But there's nothing more frustrating than putting a story like this out into the world and then seeing that it's only women that are reading it, or when we have a lecture or a presentation, it's just a room full of women. And really, I would engage and challenge every male listener of this podcast to think, well, this also does impact me in many different ways. And at the end of the day, as I said, it's not about becoming or electing just simply more women, but learning these leadership traits, acknowledging where the gaps are in our representation, and hopefully all working on this together instead of one gender trying to fix the problem that they didn't create all by themselves.
Yeah, I mean, look, I do YouTube, so I know how important it is to have the right title and thumbnail combination. And as soon as you change it, suddenly people look at it totally differently.
Yeah.
But, I guess don't judge a book by its cover is the age-old.
When we were having these discussions, we could have called this book People Changing Cities, Global Stories of Urban Transformation. And, maybe it would have broadened our audience and gotten more attention and interest. And then when you open the pages of the book, surprise, this is a book that's exclusively about women. That would have been dishonest, but that was kind of the debate that we were having, because similarly with a lot of different things, as soon as you mention gender, you cut your audience in half.
Yeah, and I think I mean, like Chris said, we went back and forth. Do we have women in the title or not? And at the end of the day, the book is about the importance of women having representation and visibility, and to not have women somewhere in the title would be dishonoring the entire purpose behind the book. And I have had people say, "Why'd you make it pink?" So there's a couple of things, but to be fair, we had a few color options, and it was sort of like, let's just lean into it for better or for worse. But also, like, we wanted people to feel like these were warm stories. They weren't like, if it was blue, maybe that would have been sort of like I don't know, a trick of the eye and people would have picked it up. But there was another option that was yellow and it just felt like it was screaming at people. And so for me, the pink is like this, like, no, come and learn about these wonderful stories. It's like a warm hug of urbanism. So, yeah, maybe the combination of women in pink set some people off. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, if people can look past that and read the stories, like Chris said, these things do impact men just as much as they impact women. And just like if we're not thinking about, how we age in cities and designing for that, or people with disabilities, we're essentially designing ourselves out of systems if we don't think of all of the ways that our lives can exist in the city. And men will experience that just at the same rate as anyone else in the city if they don't think about, hey, I'm going to get old one day. I might hurt myself and be disabled. I might have kids.
Right.
If I don't design the city for that, I'm basically making my life a lot harder.
Well, I mean, yes, again, it comes back to that empathy. A lot of people don't even think about this stuff until it affects them personally, unfortunately. And that is really the trick here. How do we get people to think about these things?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, as I said, I really, really enjoyed this book. And I think that I've already recommended it to several people I know because I think even more than anything, I think the stories of the women who've changed things are fantastic to read about. But I think even more than that, some of these improvements are just great. Like they're just really, really great.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at some of them and I'm like, wow, that is incredible. And the way that they did that. And I think there is an urge for that for sure. It's difficult for people to think about how their cities can change. And so sometimes seeing how another city did it and looking at those pictures, and it makes it easier for you to envision it yourself in your own city. And I think that's like a big part of the value of this book, to be honest, because when I look at like the school streets in Paris, which I knew about, but didn't know that much about, it's just really amazing to see it and to see what it looks like. And I'm hoping that that's something that people can get out of this book as well, to maybe, they're flipping through, they see a picture and suddenly they envision that in their city. They think of the street that they go down and they're like, huh, that might actually work here. And that in itself is incredibly valuable.
Yeah. And I mean, that's in part why we were so excited to have the photos included. And, just on the school street subject itself, we've got examples in that book from Paris, from Tirana, from Barcelona, and from Brussels. I might be missing one. I don't know. But there are like 4 different examples of what a school street can look like and 4 different ways that somebody could adapt and take that to their own city. And this is what Chris and I, are trying to do every time we share things online or we present somewhere or we're talking to groups is, don't look at it, as a copy paste idea, but look at it as this is inspiration of what could be achieved. So you could do something super hardscape like what they did in Paris and like completely change the geometry of the street, or you can do something maybe a little more like Barcelona that's a bit more temporary, can be adapted so that if we need to change things we can, hopefully working towards a complete, pedestrianization, but there's always options. And yeah, I think that's part of what we really enjoyed about this process was almost going back to how we got started in this field in terms of sharing our experiences in Vancouver and other cities, sharing the photos and hoping to inspire people to see why it's important, why it makes people feel better, but also how you can easily do something like that where you live.
Absolutely. So after all of this and all of the experiences you've been through, what do you think individuals should be doing in their own cities to be more effective?
Great question.
Yeah.
Because I get asked it a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the first pieces of advice I give to people is to get offline, with all due respect to the present company.
No, you should get offline. You really, really should.
And not necessarily get offline, but to not think that the battles and the fights are won and lost in the social media channels.
Yeah.
To understand that simply by winning the moral argument online doesn't mean that your change is going to be implemented. And at the end of the day, we know that every single one of these cities that we profiled were intense political struggles. They required majorities, coalitions, consensus building, all the hard work that goes into politicking. Sometimes they were successful, sometimes they weren't. And simply thinking that you're going to win the culture war on the internet, I think you're setting yourself up for disappointment. And you need to get out there, to get organized, to get in your community and find like-minded people who are all pushing for the same thing, and actually participate in democracy rather than shout about it on the internet.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I would add to that, and it's a conversation I think that is becoming a little more common in our so-called leftist progressive bubble, is we also need to, really value that, really recognize that we don't all feel the same way about how we're going to get there, but we all agree we need to get there. And so maybe what we need to do is sort of going back to that idea of checking our egos. We need to stop fighting for perfection in our idea of what that might be, and maybe start just working towards something better together, because we're very good at saying, as advocates, this isn't good enough. I want something better. Or look what they did here. Why can't we do that ourselves? And always pointing out the negative when it's not getting us anywhere. And the other side is doing a really good job of coming together and, rolling back success that we've had. So I think it's our responsibility, whether we're in leadership or whether we're simply, citizens trying to fight for change in our city, is, you know, recognize we don't all have the same ideas of how to get there, but, we need to work together to at least start making the steps in the right direction.
That is interesting, both of those answers, because I know I've had many requests from people. It's not that common, but there are people, especially people who are new to advocacy, who say to me, as the largest, urbanist YouTuber, they say, tell me what to do. Give me the list of things that I should do. Just make the video that tells me all the stuff that I need to do to make my city better. And I need to get through to these people that it's really not about that. There is no instruction book. If it were that easy, we would have done it already.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I absolutely stress to people is that advocacy is local. A Canadian YouTuber living in the Netherlands is not going to be able to tell you how to fix wherever you live. It's just not possible. But there are people in your city who do know at least the path to get there.
Yeah.
Whether they have the right answers or not, I don't know, but you can help them. And the only way you're going to get anything done is by finding those local people and talking to them and getting a diverse range of opinions and pushing to change things locally where you are, and not looking to people in other countries and people online to give you all the answers. It's just not going to work that way. And I think that's something that this book makes very clear too.
And to support those elected officials that you agree with, that you want to see, and I think that's the case in Brussels, for example, with Elke van den Brandt. She's been successfully reinstated into her position. She was reelected and now is still, the mobility minister there. But she needs to know that she has the support of the people, because she's getting a lot of hate. And so this may be a call out to people in Brussels. But in general, everyone has that politician that we're like, oh, yeah, I really like what they're doing. Keep going. Tell them, support them.
True.
Because if they don't know it, they're, lost in no person's land, being like, I think I'm doing the right thing. I hope I get reelected. I get a lot of vitriol.
Yeah.
And for some people, they'll just say, okay, I'll just stop then. If no one wants this, I won't keep doing it. And we don't want that.
Yeah, I mean, I know politicians like that. The one that comes to mind is Joe Cressy in Toronto, who just got fed up and left. He was good. And actually, this is one of these things that really annoys me when people say, oh, the politicians are the same, they're all crap. It's really, 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 really not true. I remember when I was doing advocacy in Toronto, there were some great people there. There were some people who genuinely wanted to do good things. There were some people who wanted to get elected so that they could get kickbacks from their developer friends. Sure, those politicians exist. But especially on the local level. And this is one of these things that I just constantly reiterate to people. It's like, please vote in your local elections. Like, please. The people in your municipal elections are way more important to your day-to-day than the people at your provincial or federal level.
Hmm.
Way more important. And the turnout is so low. And there are genuinely good politicians at the local level, because most local politicians aren't going to make billions of dollars, like the way that your federal politicians could by wheeling and dealing and stuff. Like, you're just not going to become a millionaire by being a local politician.
No.
And so it really does attract people who just genuinely care. And those people, we really, 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 really need to, as you said, tell those people that they're doing a good job and support those people. Because one of the things that can happen at local elections is, because the turnout is so low, if you get a bunch of advocates together and talk about it and get a group of people and get people excited, you can flip those elections. It really is possible. It's not actually that difficult. And sometimes it can come down to 100, 200 votes. And it really is something that's possible. And I hope that people finally start to understand that.
Yeah. And this is another conversation that we've had at the various events that we've held around this book in different cities around the world is, well, what can we do to fix this lack of representation and leadership? And one of the things that we've encouraged is quite aggressive recruitment, because I think it's fair to say men are much more likely to see themselves in these positions of leadership than women are.
True.
Women are less confident in their abilities. They're less likely to think of themselves as an expert. In the case of Elke van der Brandt, she freely admits that she wouldn't be in politics were it not for a quota system that the Green Party had to recruit a minimum number of women. And same with Valerie Plante. She said she never thought of herself as a mayor until her party asked her to run for mayor. So there's a lot of kind of reluctant leaders that we profile in this book who just needed an extra nudge or a shove, because the people around them saw that they were something special. They never thought of themselves as such. And so I think if we're not willing and able to run for office ourselves, because it's a huge sacrifice, the bare minimum we can do is push some of the great people around us to keep going, because maybe they are less likely to think of themselves as a leader of some kind.
I think that's fantastic advice. Then the example that came to me as you were saying that was Katie Wilson in Seattle, who recently got elected mayor. And she came out of nowhere. She was a transit advocate, and now she's the mayor of Seattle.
Hmm.
And Seattle is not a small city. And, who would have thought 5 years ago that a woman who was doing transit advocacy and was doing that, banging her head against the wall of trying to get things done in her city, like so many of us have done, could just become the mayor. And it really is possible. But those people need to be encouraged.
Yeah.
As you say, they need to be supported.
Absolutely. Yep. So, we'll keep doing what we can do, of course, at our local level, but trying to share those stories online as well, and the people we have the privilege to meet as we go along the way. But yeah, like you said, Jason, growing up in Canada, we focus so much on the federal elections or the provincial elections.
Everybody does.
Yeah.
It's got all the news.
Yeah. It's really what's happening. And I think I remember having this conversation with some Dutch colleagues when our last provincial election a few years ago didn't go quite as well as they had hoped, having to tell them it's 4 years, it's not even local, have that impact local, be there for those elections, be there for those people. That's where we can have the change now. And in 4 years' time, we can revisit this. So yeah, just trying to remind them, what happens at the highest levels, yeah, it has an impact, but not as much as, making sure that your local decision makers understand what we need in our cities.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's as good a place to stop as any. I know I really enjoyed this book. Again, I'm usually tired of urbanism books because they all say the same thing, which is great if you're getting into it. If you're new to it, fantastic. But at some point in time, you need to be like, yes, I need to move past just the basics. I need some examples of stuff done well. I need some encouraging stories. And I think that's what this book provides. So highly recommend it. Information in the show notes. Any last thoughts before we go?
Chris?
I mean, I usually end on that roll up your sleeves and get out from behind your keyboard note. So I've already spoiled that one. Yeah, I mean, I think we're very lucky to have gone on this kind of 15-year journey from amateur activists to doing the jobs that we have now. And we will continue to kind of share what informs and inspires us online as long as people want to listen. And well, we haven't ruled out a fourth book, but watch this space and see what else we might have in store for you all.
You got a lot of photos that you haven't used, so I know that you've got enough material there.
I mean, if someone is willing to pay us to travel and take photos and write stories about it, then, what better job is there than that?
Sure. And it's great. And I'm really glad that you can share these stories and that you're so good at sharing these stories. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank
It was
you.
very good to talk to you once again, and nice to see you again.
You as well.
And maybe we'll have you on again in the future for book number 4.
We shall see.
Thanks so much.
Oh, my head is hurting just thinking about it, but
I have resisted the urge to write a book because everybody I talk to who has written one tells me, ooh, I don't know about that. All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jason.
That's all we have on the agenda for today. I hope you enjoyed listening to it almost as much as we enjoyed making it. I really enjoy talking to other content creators about what they find interesting, and a lot of the people I have on this podcast I met since joining Nebula. Nebula is the subscription streaming service created by and for educational content creators and the people who love their content. Nebula has all sorts of educational content, from videos to podcasts to classes by your favorite creators, as well as Nebula Originals, which are high-budget productions. Honestly, Nebula is such a great platform, and I'm so happy for my content to be available there. If you use our special link, which is nebula.tv/agenda, you'll get a discount off an annual membership, which comes to only $30 a year, which I think is a fantastic deal. So check out Nebula at nebula.tv/agenda and see if there's something of interest to you. At the very least, you'll be able to hear every episode of the Urbanist Agenda a little bit earlier than everyone else, so you can get the inside scoop on what we're plotting and scheming. Thanks again for listening, and maybe next time you'll be listening on Nebula.